For 20 years, Brussels and Delhi were locked in a financial Cold War. Today, the 150% tax wall just crumbled. Is this a new golden era for your wealth, or a modern-day spice route heist? Welcome to Tax Mystery.
Today, we are breaking down a truly landmark economic agreement, the one between India and the European Union. And look, this is not just another trade pact. People are calling it a potential game changer for the entire global economy.
And that's not just hype, you know? This is literally how India is describing its brand new free trade agreement, or FTA, with the European Union. And honestly, when you dig into the sheer scale and the history here, it's pretty easy to see why they're so excited.
I mean, to really get how big a deal this is, you gotta look at the journey it took to get here. Check out this timeline. The talks first kicked off way back in 2007. But then, they hit a wall. Disagreement stalled everything for almost a decade. It wasn't until 2021 that things officially got back on track. The fact that this thing is nearly 2 decades in the making, well, that tells you just how incredibly complex and important it really is. All right, so we've got the big headlines, we've got the long history, but what does this deal actually do? You know, for businesses and for you and me, the consumers on the ground. Let's get into the fine print. So the real heart of this agreement, it boils down to this one number, 97%. What that means is a massive elimination of border taxes, what we call tariffs. We're talking about getting rid of taxes on the overwhelming majority of goods traded between these two economic giants. Okay, so how does a number like 97% translate to the real world? Well, this slide makes it crystal clear. Let's take a high-end European car being imported into India. Before this deal, the customs duty was a staggering 110%. After the deal, it's set to plummet all the way down to just 10%. That is a huge drop. And here's where it gets really interesting. This slide shows the chain reaction. Let's say a car has a factory value of 20 lakh rupees. The old 110% duty, that would balloon the final price to over 40 lakh. But with this new FTA, that final price could drop by almost half. Now you might be asking, how is that possible? Well, it's because you're not just slashing the import duty. You're actually shrinking the base cost of the car, which then lowers the amount that all the other domestic taxes are calculated on. It's a really powerful multiplier effect. And of course, it's not just about the cars. A whole range of European goods, both industrial and consumer, are going to get a lot cheaper to import into India over time. We're talking about everything from heavy machinery and chemicals to premium wines and spirits.
But this is absolutely a two-way street, make no mistake. Key Indian export sectors are going to get a huge boost. Think about labor-intensive industries like textiles, leather goods, and jewelry. They'll now have a massive competitive advantage because they can enter that huge European market with basically zero duties.
And here's a really crucial point. This deal goes way beyond just physical stuff. We're talking about services. It actually opens up 144 different service sectors for Indian companies in the EU. This is a gigantic opportunity for India's powerful services industry. You know, IT, finance, professional consulting, to compete on a whole new level. Okay, so those are the direct impacts, but what about the ripple effects? You know, a deal on paper is one thing, but what actually happens when the rubber hits the road? Well, history can tell us a lot about what the real-world outcomes of these mega deals tend to look like. And it's the obvious question, isn't it? After all that negotiation, does trade actually go up? Well, if we look at the data from some very similar agreements that both India and the EU have signed recently, the answer is crystal clear. Let's take a look at India's recent deal with the UAE. In just the first year, bilateral trade jumped a solid 16%. That's a pretty big deal. And it's a very similar story for the EU. Their big deal with Japan, it saw goods trade increase by over 14% in the first 5 years. So the pattern is pretty consistent. These kinds of deals really do boost trade. Okay, but there is a catch. You don't just automatically get these tariff discounts. There's something called rules of origin, and it's absolutely critical. The best way to think about it is like a passport for your product. A business has to prove with a whole lot of documentation that its product is genuinely from India or the EU. No passport, no discount. And here's another really important thing to remember. This deal only changes the taxes at the border, that customs duty we talked about. All the domestic taxes you pay inside the country, like GST, they stay exactly the same. This deal doesn't touch those. All right, so now that we've got those key details down, let's zoom out. Let's look at the big picture and see how this one agreement could fundamentally reshape the entire global economic map. I mean, the official projections here are just staggering. The models are suggesting that over the long term, EU exports to India could more than double, and Indian exports to the EU, they could jump by 80 to 90%. Those are massive numbers. But that kind of growth comes with a very deliberate trade-off. You can see it right here on this slide. India is consciously making a choice. They're trading a pretty big drop in their customs revenue, about 14.5%, in exchange for a long-term boost to their overall economy, their GDP. And this trade-off, it's actually part of a much bigger global trend. You might have heard of the China Plus One strategy. Well, this deal is a cornerstone of that. For years now, companies have been trying to avoid putting all their manufacturing eggs in one basket. This agreement basically positions India as a powerful, credible alternative, a major new hub for global supply chains. Now, like any huge economic shift, there are going to be clear winners and losers inside India. On one side, you've got the winners, those labor-intensive export sectors we talked about, and of course, the services industry. But on the other side, domestic producers, like the local premium car makers, are about to face some seriously tough competition from all those European imports. So, the deal is signed. The ink is dry. The focus now shifts completely from negotiation to execution. So what's the big takeaway? For businesses, for investors, for anyone just watching the global economy, what happens next? Well, the companies that are really going to win from this, they're not the ones just celebrating the headlines. No. The real winners will be the ones who get to work right now. The ones who start actively restructuring their entire operations around these new complex rules, everything from their supply chains to their compliance systems. One of the sources we use for this explainer put it perfectly. The real advantage here, what investors call tax alpha, it isn't just about getting that sweet tariff cut. It's about mastering the entire complex new system that this deal creates. We're talking customs, GST, those rules of origin, the whole shebang. So when you boil it all down, this historic free trade agreement, it's not a finish line, it's a starting gun. It kicks open a huge multi-year window of opportunity. And the big question is, who will be fastest to capture?
This is brief summary, which summarize whole deal. Feel free to pause and take screenshot. Also, please note you can check out Google Notebook LM to generate similar research and content generation. Thank you for watching. The architecture of wealth is built on the lessons of the past. Don't let your future become a mystery. Follow Tax Mistory for the next blueprint. The 2026 tax cliff is coming. Are you the architect or the victim? Comment blueprints below, and I'll send you my private strategy guide.